Okay,
your actual
fine.
computer.
Okay, so everybody,
Thanks, Anne.
just know that you're going to be recorded, and I am too. All right, are you turning it over to me?
Take it away.
Great. All right, welcome everybody. I am delighted to have you, and I am so thrilled to have you for 8 weeks, because that really allows us to do the kind of deep dive I really love to do. Before we start, let's do just this little intro. Sarah, if you could read from the chat box what people said, that their, and their hopes and fears about this grant writing, not their names. Let's just read everybody's 1 to 3 words.
Great. Daunting and enormously time consuming. Time, deadlines, figuring out the magic words. Scary, time consuming, exciting opportunities. Time consuming, tricky, and art form. Time consuming, paper, housing, relationship building. I think that planning, strategies. Yeah, I think that sums up most of the words.
Okay, very good. Well done. So I wish that I could say, oh no, it's not time consuming. I'm going to teach you the real shortcuts, but actually that's not the case. Grant writing is time consuming if it's done right. And so one of the most important things is to allow yourself the time so that you give yourself every advantage. So I think half of you said time consuming, and I'm here to say, yes, to do it right, it does take time. So I'll introduce myself just a little bit. I have been teaching grant writing, I realize, for 20 years now, which is amazing. And I have taught everything from like 2-hour workshops, which I really have to talk fast. That's very hard for me to do, to full graduate classes at the not Marlborough, the Marlborough Graduate School that we all know from Southern Vermont is now closed, but I did that for several years. And I mostly teach folks who are either in nonprofits, education, municipal organizations, and many times leaders of small organizations, because most of our organizations in Vermont are small. How did I become a grant writing teacher? Well, by grant writing. So I have been writing grants for many, many years before I taught grant writing, and I have done everything from huge federal ones. In fact, my largest one was, actually the one I'm most proud of is a $6.2 million grant that I was the main writer for. And this $6.2 million was even more money back when I did this 30 years ago or so. Maybe it was, about 30 years ago, for the state of Vermont to redo the children's mental health system. And I even did a bigger grant, a $7.2 million grant for another national organization. I've done all the way from that down to very small grants of, I worked with a woman to, on the first round of grants for the Vermont Women's Fund, the grants were $10,000, and we were so excited to get that grant, which was for, I still remember, a revolving loan fund for single parents who were living in poverty and were really trying to work their way out. So I was almost as proud of that one as I was of the 6.2 million one. And I've done everything in between. What I teach in this course is not the big federal grants, because they're their own special animal unto themselves. And most of you are with small, with municipalities, and some of you will do federal grants, but you will probably be working with a regional planning commission or with some other towns or through the state. And it's unusual for a small town. Some of you will do this, but unusual for a small town to be able to get a tremendous, huge grant. One great thing that's happening now, of course, is there's the ARPA funds because of COVID. So there are some wonderful opportunities and more opportunities for federal funding, but that is done through the state and through towns. So it's not like these huge HUD grants I've worked on for, you know, many millions of dollars. And how did I learn to be a grant writer? I worked for the federal government for a number of years, and I wrote requests for proposals, and I served on grant writing committees. So, and grant review committees. And that is an amazing way to learn how to write grants, because you learn right away what works and what doesn't. So if you ever have the chance to serve on a review committee, definitely sign up and do that. I know that some of you have had some grant writing experience, and some of you are complete newbies. And I have tailored this class to both and all of you. And I like to make it interactive. You'll see that almost every session has a part where you'll work in small groups and benefit from each other's knowledge and wisdom. But also I welcome questions and comments. And so that's just fine as we go along if you have something to add. And especially those of you who have had experiences grant writing, and sometimes some very frustrating experiences, you can kind of, nod your head and raise and say, yes, I've been through that, and this is why it didn't work. So it's good to kind of hear from the school of hard knocks sometimes and learn what worked and what didn't. So what I'd like you to do is, rather, if you have a question or a comment, rather than use the chat box, I find that I just can't multitask like that. So I'd rather have you we're a small enough group, you can speak up, or you can raise your hand, raise the little yellow hand, and hopefully I'll see that. And if I don't, then somebody else will tell me. So do feel free to ask any questions. And in fact, are there any at this point before we launch in? Hearing none, off we go. All right, so the first, we're starting with the basics. And I really do feel like these 4 words, compelling, complete, clear, and correct, if you manage to check off all those boxes, you have a really good chance of being funded. It's easier to say than do. And what I always say is it's not luck that I have been a successful grant writer. And I want to tell you from the beginning that even the most successful grant writer will come to a point where they no longer have that magic. So I think I wrote 4 or 5 grants in a row before I finally wrote one that was turned down. And I really thought like I was the, end all and be all and the best grant writer anywhere. And the people who hired me were feeling that too. And then sure enough, we didn't get one. Of course, I blame it on somebody else. But anyway, that will happen to all of us. So you are not going to get every grant. However, there are some pretty simple secrets, and they don't involve being the very smartest person, although I do think I am smart, and it's good to really know your program and be smart about it. But there's really a couple of rules. And one is that you do a thorough job. And it is hard work, and it does take time. And you really have to look, if it's a $10,000 grant, then you sure don't want to spend much more than a couple of days on it. But if you're going for a $30,000, $40,000 grant, that may take an entire week or so, and a really hard week, and bringing other people in. If you're looking at a much bigger grant, 100,000, 150,000, that may take a couple of weeks to do right. And so that's one of the tricks, is to give yourself the time. Another, not so secret trick is make sure that you are a fantastic match with what the funder wants. And that brings us to this first bullet. Select a project that fills a real need and demonstrate project fit with the funder's mission and goals. And this is easier said than done, because we, sitting in our organizations, we are very excited about what we do. We know that it's really important. We know it really matters. And we think that the funders should agree with us and that they should also love what we do. But we forget that when you look at, I think there's 15 of you, you're actually
Just don't worry about it.
What? Oh, anyway,
Sorry.
yeah. I think
Gretchen,
there's
can you
15
please
of you
mute yourself?
or something
Yeah,
like
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
Sorry, I thought I was.
that's fine. You're competing against each other. And so you think you are the greatest show in town, but these are all great shows in town. And so it's incumbent on you to not only show that you have a great project, but this is really an important piece, is that you fit with the funder's mission and goals. And it doesn't matter how wonderful your project is if you're not a great match for what the funder wants. I want to know if any of you are willing to speak up, and then I'm going to give you an example from my own life of a case where maybe you worked for somebody and they got really excited about a grant and you kind of shook your head and said, I don't know if that's really a great fit, but somebody convinced you to go for it and it didn't work out. Has anyone ever done that? If you have, speak up. Well, good for you, because then I learned the hard way, and it was my own self who did it. So I was the executive director of a youth serving program, actually a Boys and Girls Club in Rutland, Vermont, for a while, a long time ago. And we wanted to plant a youth garden. And I came across a grant that said funds projects for the environment, improve the environment. And I got all excited, and thank goodness they asked for a letter of intent, which is very common now. In many cases, you will send in a letter of intent before you write the whole grant. And I like that, because that means that you don't have to do the whole grant. But that letter of intent is really like the cover letter to a resume. You don't just whip it off. You treat it as a mini grant. So I spent, certainly an entire day on making a really smooth, great letter of intent. But I hadn't done my homework. And I'll give myself a little excuse that this was in the very early days of the internet, and we weren't used to really exploring the way we do now, but I should have anyway. And I got back, I wrote a beautiful letter, if I do say so myself, but I got back a letter from them a few weeks later saying that my project didn't really match what they were looking for. Well, then somebody's dog is barking. So if you can mute yourself there.
I'm sorry, I'm trying.
Okay. Sorry. Naturally, that's when the dog barks, right? So I got back a letter that said that basically telling me I was, speaking of dogs, barking up the wrong tree. Then I did my homework and I found out that this organization really funds more like scientific studies of air quality, water quality, and that sort of thing. And I should have done my homework. And that was a good lesson. I've never done that again. So you want to make sure that you're a fantastic fit with the funder's mission and goals. And the other thing is make sure that it actually is something that you really want to do. Maybe I can do that. Let's see if I can. I muted myself. I muted myself. Okay. Well, anyway. Okay, next. Keep the grant selection criteria and the reviewer at the top of mind. This is something that every time I teach this class, I go through and I say, well, not every time, but for a long time, I'd say, okay, I can get rid of this. It's so obvious. Nobody would do this. And then somebody asked me to review their grant, or I'm on a review committee. And I look, and people make this mistake all the time. Folks are so eager to share their exciting project and what it is that they want to do, that they don't bother to very carefully read the selection criteria. And when I say selection criteria, what I mean is, in many cases, especially larger grants, there will actually be criteria that you have to fulfill, and there's points given to it. So for example, things like staffing I'm not going to do the math here, so it probably won't add up to 100%, but staffing might be 20%. Your project plan might be 35%. Evaluation might be 15%. Project need might be 25%. And this varies according to what the funder wants. And if you don't pay attention to it, woe unto you, because you are losing points. And I literally, with a grant where there's selection criteria, I literally make an outline following the proposal format that's requested. And if there's not, many times now, there's a limit on pages or even on words or characters. But if it just says, narrative, 7 pages, then I will, if project plan is 40% and staffing is 20%, I will write, I'll divide up the space that I'm doing so that I make sure that I spend more characters or words, if I'm allowed, on project plan than on staffing, or whatever has the most weight. But again, in many cases, what I'm having to do is, and you'll have to do, is meet literally character limits. So I'm going to ask you all a question here. Speaking of limits on characters, let's say that there are character limits or word limits, and that you are allowed 500 words for project need and 200 words for evaluation and 300 words for staffing. Do you fill every one of those words or not? Who has an answer? Or do you try to keep it shorter? Go ahead and unmute yourself and tell me what you think.
Hi, I would say if you can be a little bit more concise and not use up every character, that may be beneficial.
Okay, Nick, guess what? I don't agree with you.
Okay.
And here's why. And I have to tell you that half of new grant writers feel like you do. And that gives me a real advantage as a grant writer, because this is the way I look at it. The funder is the king and queen. And I'm going to say this a bunch of times. We have to constantly put ourselves in their seat. If they decide that they think staffing is worth 300 words and evaluation is worth 400 words or whatever it is, then by God, I am going to give them every last one of those words, because my project is the most important project that they're going to see. It's the best project, and I want to prove it. So I am going to use every chance. And rather than try to keep it as concise as I can, if I can keep it concise, when I have, let's say I'm talking about staffing, then I will list my staff positions, but then I can build it more up. It's not fluff. I add important things like, our staff combined have 30 years of experience, or, we bring to this incredible background in whatever it is the funder thinks is very important. And so I use every last one of those characters. Now, even if I didn't want to, I would, because I tend to overwrite. So I can tell you that there's a job that I'm doing at the end of every single grant. And that is trying as hard as, I have to, I'm cutting. I always overwrite. So I put in everything that I want to put in, and then I look it over and I say, okay, what do I absolutely, what has to be there? So I fill every single line, because I want them to know that, if they want a page on whatever it is, then we have a page worth of information to give them. And what that means is that we have to really think out our grant so that, we are able to, for example, on project plan, I have seen projects where project plan, they allow 2 pages and it's only 1 page. To me, that means that they haven't thought it out carefully. If they're not able, if the funder wants 2 pages and they only give 1 page, then that, to me, the funder, they want to know that much about your project. And if you don't have that much to tell them, then that means it's probably not going to be a really strong fundable project. Does that make sense? You can.
It makes complete sense. It goes against my history major philosophy of not putting in adjectives that don't belong. So
No, I don't know. You don't put in fluff, but
I think I understand what you're saying, and I would endeavor, of course, to be as, and if I sat there and went, oh, okay, I've got 1 page and they want 2 pages, I would definitely say, okay, there's stuff missing. I think I agree with what you're saying, and I think it's just, as I said, is I tend to overwrite. You should have seen my thesis.
Yeah, no,
And-
you do. I mean, I overwrite, and then it's a beautiful thing, because every time I say, oh my God, there's no way, I'm at 800 words and they only want 650. I can't do it. And then I have to, because that's a requirement. Every single time it's a better product once I've cut it down. But if I have more room, I can give examples. I can build it out a little. I can say, these are the kinds of materials we're going to be using in our course, and, really paint the picture. It's a beautiful thing when you can do that. So,
yeah, I understand. I mean, I totally agree that's optimal, and what we're talking about here is being optimal. So
okay,
I agree
moving
with what
on.
you're saying.
So follow the proposal format, responding to each requirement in order. This is similar to the one above, but I'm saying this because, again, I see so many times where the funder asks, for example, and this is the funder's prerogative, they can start with whatever they want to. They don't have to start with describe your project. They can say, describe your community and the environment in which you'll be operating. And I see so many applicants they just can't hold themselves in, and rather than do that, they start describing the project, and you just lost yourself some points, because if you're describing the project there, then you're going to have to be kind of redundant when you actually get to the project description, and you are not going to get those points, because, again, the funder is king and queen, and if they want to know the environment in which you're operating in the community, then by God, that's what I'm going to tell them. So it's a real discipline. And the first thing I do is I write an outline exactly as the funder asked. And I'll tell you, with bigger grants, sometimes you're just scratching your head, and let's say they might say something like, describe your community and the environment in which you'll be operating. And then 3 questions later, they'll say project need. And you'll say to yourself, well, what do you mean project need? I already told you. I already described this community and how needy it is, and why the lack of a library is such a problem, and the fact that kids are 3 grades behind in reading, and people, there's people who don't have cars and they can't go 3 towns over. I already told you that, you idiots. And you say, okay, refer back to question 1. No, you just lost your points, because if the funder wants it, then we're going to give it. So you're going to have to go back to your question 1 and describe that community, without focusing on that project need. And you're going to have to separate it, because they are the boss and they're the ones who, get to decide. Accuracy counts, check and double check spelling, grammar, titles, and numbers. This is particularly true, again, in larger grants, but also in smaller grants. If you're doing a budget and somebody else is working on the budget, and let's say you decided when you started out that you're going to have a project manager and a project assistant, and then halfway through you decided, you know what, let's call that project manager project director, but you forget to tell your budget person, and then you're in a bad scramble at the end and you hand it in and it's 2 different titles. That does not look good. And same with numbers. And another example is, I remember a grant that I was working on for a Head Start program in Rutland County. And we originally wanted to have, I think, a half-time literacy specialist. And as time went on, we realized we really couldn't afford a half-time, that we were going to have to use, I don't know, I think 1/3 time. And sure enough, at the last minute, we realized that we hadn't communicated that clearly. And so the budget said 1/3, but the narrative said 1/2. So you want to go back and check, and ideally have someone else, read it who is not quite as close to it. Because when you get so close to it, you get kind of lost in it and you don't see these little mistakes. So that's that. Any questions about these basics? these are basics, but they're really, really important. And I have to say that if you follow these alone, this alone puts you ahead of about 50% of grant writers. And I'm telling you, I'm surprised time and time again that smart people who really love their programs don't follow these rules and they don't get the grant. Don't follow these along with not taking the time. So I'm just going to leave you with one last rule here, which is if you come across a grant that, let's say, and it's a perfect fit, and you say, oh, this is just what we need for our town's, I don't know, someone told me that she's on the Historic Society to refurbish our historical building. That is fantastic, or our historic center, or whatever it is. And then you look, and the grant is due in 2 weeks. And then I look and I see that the grant was released a month ago. Do you apply? And you say, okay, 2 weeks, I can do it. Do you apply or do you not apply? Who has an answer to that? Would you go for it or not? It's a great match, but you have 2 weeks into a and it's a 6-week RFP period. What do you say, anybody? Go for it or not?
I say
I'm
go.
not gonna let you answer, Nick. Somebody else.
I'm gonna go for it.
Okay. Who said that?
Sharon.
Okay. All right. I don't agree.
I
I'll tell
thought
you
you
why.
would.
Let me tell you why. Unless you are, most of us have regular jobs, we have other responsibilities, we have kids, we have things we're doing. So unless you can say, when you see that 2-week period, unless you can say, I'm clearing the decks, that's all I'm going to do for 2 weeks, I would not apply. I would say, you know what? I'm going to have to wait until next year's grant period. And here's why. Because you're competing against me. And I made sure that I got that RFP on the day or within a few days after it was released. I've been working on it for a month. I've put together a planning committee. I've got my collaborators. I've got strong letters of support. I've really thought through and then thought through again what the project's going to look like. If you have to throw it together in 2 weeks and unless you're able to completely focus on this, and I mean like 12 hours a day, then you are starting so behind the 8 ball that it's going to look like you threw it together. And compared to what I submit, knowing that these are competitive grants, I mean, presuming it is, presuming that they're going to fund 6 grants out of the 20 that are submitted, you have put yourself so far behind at that point that I just don't think it's worth it. And I have turned down great grant opportunities that are a great fit because I know that there's just no way that I can do the job I need to in 2 weeks compared to what I would have if it's 6 weeks or even 4.5 weeks. So that's my answer. And I wonder if any of you have done any of these last minute grants and had an experience with what that was like. Has anyone tried that? If you have, speak up.
Yeah, I mean, we've done that at BDCC.
And how did it go?
Mixed. Sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't. Very stressful.
Yeah, it is very stressful. And when you see something and you go, oh, we only have a week or 2 left and it was released. I mean, to me, I just enter that knowing this huge weight on me that somehow I have to play catch up with, and I presume that I'm competing against people like me who know how to write grants, who've been doing this for a long time and are taking the whole 6 weeks. So good for you for getting some of those grants. That's great. But it is very stressful and you kind of have to drop everything else, right?
Yes.
And just focus on that. And again, that would be my only caveat. If you really decide this is the thing for us, and we are just going to tell everybody else that, the meetings aren't happening, we're not doing this activity, we're putting off everything else, then you could go for it. But most of us can't do that. So, all right, moving on. What does it take to have a good grant, to have a strong grant? I'm just going to go over this briefly because we're going to spend several weeks on this. But just to get an idea of how I think about projects, developing your project idea, first you need a goal. And to me, that really is a clear one sentence, which takes a while to come to figure out, of what will be accomplished by the project's end, so that the reader, the funder, when they read this, they say, aha, I get it. I really understand. And I'm just going to give you an example here. Open and operate a senior center to help older residents of Amesville remain healthy, active, engaged, and independent. You can see how that's a nice, clear goal. And it includes both what we're going to do and kind of what what we expect of it. So it's not just open and operate a senior center, but it's why we're doing it, to remain healthy, active, engaged, and independent. And then another piece that you're going to be really thinking hard about is outcomes, the results or impact of all your activities. So when I say that we're going to help seniors remain healthy, active, engaged, and independent, right there, I've led to what I'm going to have to talk about. I have promised that this senior center will help people to remain healthy, active, engaged, and independent. So with my outcomes, I'd better be already thinking about how I'm going to prove and show at the end of this grant that we are having activities and engagement that accomplishes those goals, and that we can show them in measurable ways. We're going to have objectives, which are measurable sets of strategies and actions that achieve the goal, and then tasks that show how we're going to achieve the objectives. And I see all grants, and we're going to talk about this much more later, but I just want to give an overview. I really see almost all grants as a pyramid, starting at the top with the goal, one goal. And I'm telling you, many requests for proposal will say, what are your goals? And I always turn it into one goal, because if I can define one clear, measurable goal, then that really helps my brain and the funder's brain to understand what it is we're working towards. And then we have our measurable objectives, 3 to 5, that carry out that goal. And then under that, under each objectives, we have 3 to 5 tasks. I'm just giving this as a quick overview now, because we're going to be working on this later, just so you understand. And any questions here at this point? We're going to dive deep into this later. Okay. And then some other basics. We're still talking, really about the basics here. What does it take to do a great grant?
Question.
Oops, sorry. Let me go back.
Yeah, I was just wondering about when you're developing your project
Yes.
idea. Are you identifying a grant before, or are you coming up with your project idea and then searching for grants that fit?
Really good question. To me, in my organization, I want to have several ideas at all times. I want to have ideas that when a grant does come up, we have something that, matches. And that doesn't mean there's going to be plenty of grants that we see that we say, not for us, doesn't fit the fun, it's not a great match. But if you have, for example, at, any given time, a capital project, a kind of human resources project where maybe you're building your staff, and then sort of an activities project where we're adding this set of activities, to me, that's a really nice kind of group of projects to have, so that when grants come of different types, you're sort of ready to go for them. I don't think it makes sense, even, sometimes you can do this, but rarely does it work to someone comes and says, look at this great grant I have. And then, you have to say, okay, let's have a meeting and figure out how the heck can we, how are we going to come up with something that really fits this, that shows that we really have this need. I think it's much better to have done the kind of strategic planning where you already kind of know what you're aiming for. And so that when grants do come, you can say, aha, that is a fantastic match for us, rather than kind of trying to, you know, turn yourself into a pretzel, making yourself fit the grant. And I think it really shows too. Sarah.
I think too, Lee, that's a great question. And I think something that to just keep in mind is you don't want to be sort of pigeonholed into doing something that doesn't really fit your mission or your organization. And so the downside to finding a grant and then creating a program to fit that is you then might be, and then if you get that funding, then you're required to follow through on that. And in the end, the project might not actually be something that benefits your organization. So
Right, that's the old mission creep problem.
Yeah, I like Anne's suggestion of like always having projects sort of relatively worked out, and then as grants come in, you can kind of see which ones fit best for that project.
And the truth is, if you do strategic planning in your organization, you will have those projects, because you'll have several areas that you're building on, that you're planning for, that you're looking ahead for. I'm sure that's true in your organization, Sarah. There are, you know, there's areas that you know already that you want to build and expand on.
Yeah.
And so to me, actually, grant writing, unless you're just like writing a grant to get a new stove, you know, something that simple. But if it's a real project, or expanding your staffing, or, you know, adding something new that is multifaceted, it really is strategic planning. It's part of it fits very well with, you know, and that's what you want to show. You want to show that this is a natural next step for us, that this is a great fit. And if you're just writing for that grant, it's really hard not to have that be obvious, that you're saying, aha, here's something that we might be able to do. So, okay. Why does your project matter, and what difference will it make? You want to tell a story. That's a really important piece of grant writing. And to me, that really means that you need to sit in that funder's chair and say, what is it that we want to tell them that will really make a difference? And this is sometimes the hardest thing, or not the hardest thing, but it's a hard thing for folks who are already excited about their organization. Let's just say it's an organization that builds bike paths, and you already love biking, and you love bike paths, and you know, I mean, it's like, you know, duh, why wouldn't we want a new bike path? Of course we would. That makes perfect sense. But let's say you're going against many other organizations that are funding all kinds of different recreational opportunities, you know, building up parks, rec centers, you know, swimming pools, whatever it is. You cannot presume that the funder loves biking. So you need to make your case and tell a story. And I intentionally picked a grant that I worked on some time ago that that is a very dry topic, but they made it come alive. This is really good. So go ahead and read this to yourselves. And what you can see is the writers made sure that this was written for everybody, not just for people who already love libraries and spend times in library catalogs. They used action words, and they made it really clear that, you know, this is a real problem. The comparison is a really smart idea too. So they used great words like wreak havoc and countless dead end cross references, confusing jumble. Those are words that we can all relate to. And they took what could be a very dry subject and made it live. And then the comparison, we are far behind other libraries. We all can understand that. You can see how they did a beautiful job here of making sure that we understand, you know, why this matters, that they tell the story. So if this public library cataloging project can make their story come alive, then you can too. That shouldn't be a problem. I think I'm going to read you one other, which I tell you, this is one that I worked on. I didn't work so much on this one, this public library cataloging project. I just did a little bit. So this is really their words. But here's one that I worked on. It was a specialized residence for domestic violence survivors. Why does your project matter and what difference will it make? Substance abuse combined with the long-term effects of physical and sexual abuse often has crippling effects on the survivor's parenting abilities. A mother who has no idea of what normal or safe looks like for herself often has distortions about what is safe for her child. Regardless of the difficulties experienced by the battered woman, her children are deeply bonded to her. Should a mother be intoxicated at a shelter or child welfare office after being assaulted by her partner, it is truly wrenching to watch a crying child carried off by a social worker or police officer as the child struggles to remain with her mother. Children are frightened and confused. Whatever their level of functioning, mothers are often the only constant in their child's life. Assisting the mother to be healthy and stable is the foundation for helping the child. So, that one really pulls on the heartstrings, and it really makes a very difficult, troubling problem come alive. And I have read this many, many times since I helped write it, and it still just gets to me every time. So we're not all going to have projects like that. Many of our projects will be more like the library cataloging project, but whatever it is, tell your story. And then the other half of that, of course, is use facts and data to make your case. A lazy grant writer will just say, here, this is an adult daycare project. And I didn't even know what adult daycare was when I got this project. But I wrote this, I was the main writer for this grant. Adult daycare is a wonderful resource for families who have an usually elderly and or disabled person living with them who has Alzheimer's or dementia. And it allows the family to be able to have someone in their home and they can go to work. And the elderly person with dementia or Alzheimer's can go to a wonderful, positive place with a lot of stimulation and activities and other people. And so isn't isolated and left home alone every day. So anyway, a lazy person would just say, oh, there's a great need. Everyone knows that Vermont is one of the oldest states, has one of the oldest populations in the country. And so many old people are in need of help. And this will do a great job to help families. Read what I did here. So you can read that what I did is I intentionally used 3 different resources, and I talked about and this is how you reference. You don't have much space, so you reference you just have to have the information so that people can get it. This was before we were using the internet that much, so in this case this was not online. I had to gather all these materials, but in your case it's fine to just list a website and the year and who it's by. So you can see council. So I both used the Rutland Regional Planning Commission. I talked about how, what we expect the change to be from the Rutland Regional Profile. And I actually did my homework and showed that I knew how many residents there were with mobility or self-care limitations. So this makes a real difference between the person who is going to, really get the funder to get up and say, aha, they know what they're doing. And the one who says, well, yeah, they just say there's a lot of old people and they need help. So we're going to spend a whole session on how you find this kind of data, which I find very exciting. And I hope you will too, even more exciting than library cataloging. Any questions before we move on? Okay. Now, we're going to come to the interactive part of our project, of our session, of this session. What we're going to do is we're going to select potential projects that some of you actually would like to work on. And you are then going to have peers who are going to help you throughout this course work on these projects. You're not going to write a real grant because we don't have time to do that. We only have about we have 30 minutes and then some review time to work on this for each one of the classes. But you're going to see how applying the concepts that I've talked about really helps you start writing a really clear, developing a really clear, strong project, and how your peers, even though they're not in your organization, will ask you the questions because they're almost like the people who would be on a review committee. They don't know that much about your project. They don't necessarily care about what you care about, but they're going to help you craft a strong case. And that's actually what my position was in most of the grants I wrote. I was usually what I called a ghost grant writer. I was brought in from the outside. And like that adult daycare project, I'd never heard of adult daycare. The Head Start project, I didn't know anything about Head Start. Same with many of the projects I've worked on. I worked on a youth suicide project and had to become an expert in youth suicide. And what that means, people say, well, how can you learn enough to write a grant? What that means is that I have to be able to present the project, or the people who are hiring me, they have to tell me enough about the project and help me understand it in a way that I can explain it so that funders can understand it. And so in a way, having an outsider like me, or in this case, your peers who will be working with you, will actually help you really write this project in a way that others outside of your own organization can appreciate and understand. And every time I do this, it's amazing how far you get, and I'm always impressed. So this is your chance, folks. I gave you 1 day warning that 3 of you are going to be our the projects that we're going to work on, and then we're going to break into breakout groups and help each other. And the first thing that you're going to do is a project summary. That's what you're doing today. What does that mean? That is a 1 to 2 sentence, very concise, clear presentation of what our project is, giving as much information as you can about the project so that it gets the funder excited and they say, I want to read more, but without, as Nick said, adding on a lot of extra adjectives. You probably will have a few just to, create interest, but it can't be a long and winding sentence. And I'm going to allow you to have 2 short sentences or 1 longer sentence. And I'm not just doing this for an exercise. This often is the first thing a funder will see. Often they'll ask for, we want your project summary in, 50 words or less, or even 35 words. So that's what we're going to do now. And then we're going to spend a little time talking about these project summaries and making sure that they're clear. And what you want to do with these project summaries is the project idea, who it serves, and why it matters. That's a tall order. And I often do this, just kind of almost as a place saver starting out. And then once I've written the grant, we come back and we have a sharper, clearer, better picture. So these aren't going to be perfect, but it's a great start. And it's often the way that I start I don't write grants anymore. But when I did, I would start by saying, okay, let's get a clear picture of what this is. And let's do it in just as few words as we can. So who has a project that they would like to share and have a group work on? And you have to be a little brave to do this, I know, but it also, I can tell you, it's really going to be an advantage. And even in, Sarah, I think you saw, even in those 2 half-day workshops I did, we made some pretty good progress on those projects, and folks went away excited about them.
Yeah, I was going to say it is, bravery to put it out on the line, but you actually get sort of a lot of work done on the project in this course. So an
So,
advantage for sure.
Who would like to suggest a project?
I would, Anne, this is Deb Barrier.
Okay, Deb.
So I'm interested in finding a funding source for a grant for our Vernon historians to preserve our historical building that we have. Because we clearly cannot put that on the shoulders of the taxpayers. So the justification again is just historical heritage and local education.
Okay, that's an excellent project. That's great. You're group one. Everybody remember Deb Barrier is group one, and you're gonna get to choose which group you're in until that group is full. So that will be seeking, oh, I forgot to tell you, these grants are going to be $30,000. Okay, so just keep that in mind. That doesn't mean your project is $30,000, but the funding will be $30,000. I wanted to start with something, give something that's not too small and not too big. So a funding source for Vernon historians to preserve the historic building in town. All right. Who has one that's not preserving a historic building? We want something a little different now.
I've got one that works.
Okay, speak up loud and tell us your name.
Yeah, I'm Madison Kramer. One of the projects I'm working on right now is recovery housing for specifically men in the Bennington area.
Okay, and just for those who don't know, explain very briefly what recovery housing means.
Yeah, so recovery housing in the way that we are proposing is housing as a transition from substance use disorder, like recovery. It's after hospitalization or any kind of treatment in a group home with specifically 9 members.
Okay, great. That's all we're going to hear for now. Excellent. You can see that these folks already have sort of told us what's going to be in this summary, but it's going to be, great to see how you put it in 1 or 2 sentences. All right, that's excellent. So Madison, you're group 2. And group 2 is going to be recovery housing for men in the Bennington area transitioning from substance use disorder back to the community. Okay, number 3. Last but not least, who wants to suggest one? I know there's projects out there. You don't have to be a grant writer. You never have to have written a grant, but you wouldn't be taking this if you didn't want to get some money. Wouldn't $30,000 be nice? I know somebody there has something in mind.
I think mine might be a little similar to Deb's, but in town hall, we do not have an operating, a chair that takes people to the upstairs of town hall for town meetings. So I'm looking for a grant to get an operational lift and also probably some electrical work in the old building to make it possible. But I think if someone has a better one, it might be similar to Deb's.
It is kind of similar to Deb's, but we'll use it if no one else. And it's also a little different. What town is it?
Townsend.
Okay.
It looks like Sharon has unmuted herself. She might have another.
Okay. Sharon, do you have a different one?
Just a thought. I'm part of a nonprofit that works to maintain an old rail trail. And we purchased some land that was for sale that would make a great parking area if it were improved, and the brownfield area was cleaned up, and we could get some something like a trailhead sign and some distinction to put information about the trail and how to use the trail.
Okay, if you don't mind, we will use that instead. I agree. That is enough different that it'll attract different, we want them so that everybody kind of gets a favorite. So, if you don't mind, no Townsend this time, next time. But you might want to join, group one with, group one with Deb. All right, so we're going to go with Sharon is group 3. Parking, signage, and other improvements to help folks be able to use an old rail trail. And where is this, Sharon?
It's in South Londonderry,
Okay, wonderful.
and it's part of a trail that goes all the way to Brattleboro. with a big
Fantastic.
gap in the middle.
Okay, these are great, exciting projects. They're all fundable. They could all use $30,000. They could all probably use more than $30,000. But we're going to be talking about budget and match and how to use all that later on. So $30,000 will be a big help. So here's what we're going to do. And I hope that it works really quickly and well as it did when I practiced and when I've done it before. We are going to go into breakout rooms. I'm going to create 3 breakout rooms. And everybody is going to go into one breakout room. And if there are 5 people already, then you will pick a second break. You'll pick another breakout room. So it's limited to 5. I hope that 14 or 15 is the number we have. I think that's right.
Can you repeat the different rooms? What each
Yes.
room is?
Number 1 is going to be with Deb, and it's a funding source for the Vernon historians to preserve the historical building in town. Number 2 with Madison is recovery housing for men in the Bennington area, transitioning from substance use disorder problems, and they're transitioning back into the community. And number 3 with Sharon is helping a nonprofit to maintain an old rail trail, and specifically to fix up a parking area and put some signage and maybe other ways to make it attractive for folks in the South Londonderry area. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to create the 3 rooms. You're going to choose room 1, 2, or 3, and you will have 30 minutes. I'd like you to very briefly introduce yourselves. I'd like you to choose a timekeeper and presenter. And this isn't very much time, but you will do it. I guarantee you will be able to come up with a 1 to 2 sentence project summary. You'll have about probably 20 minutes to do that. And then I'll pop in or you'll get a note saying a message saying that 1 minute warning, it'll be over. And then we'll come back together and the presenter will present it, and I'm going to write it for all of us to see. And then we'll have a little time to comment on these. But this is really the start to these projects. And it's really think again, put yourself in the funder's seat. What is the first thing I want that funder to see that is going to get them excited about my project, knowing that they are not necessarily either, historic building buffs or know or care that much about men recovering from substance abuse disorder, or they may never use the rail trail. And yet we want to show them that this is, an important resource, and do it in that 1 or 2 sentences. And it basically what you want to do is to make it understandable by everybody. So any questions before we break? Oh, and also I'll be rotating back and forth. So I'll be dropping into your group. So if you have any questions, I'll be in there. Any questions, Sarah?
A few things. So there's 16 people. So there will be 2 groups of 5 and 1 group of 6.
Oh, there's
Just
16
so-
people? Oh,
Yeah.
geez. Okay, I think that we should have, I didn't realize it was 16. I think we should have 4 groups. So guess what? The town hall, the chair is back. So who's from Townsend who shared that?
I am, but if someone has some other one that they want to put out, that would be totally fine too.
Going, gone. And tell me your name.
It's Alenka.
Oh yeah, Alenka. Okay. So number 4, we're gonna have 4 groups because 4 is really an ideal number to work together. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
number 4 is the town hall in Townshend needs a chair so that folks with disabilities or, you know, big packages or whatever can take a lift to the top. And there's also some electrical work and possibly other work to be done. And this is a very, you know, this is fine. It's fine that there's 2 that are kind of similar. They're enough different. And this is the kind of project that I think plenty of you would be interested in. So we are going to have 4 groups. And any questions before I put you into those groups? I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. All
And
right.
I would also suggest you can pause recording because it only will record in the main room and everyone's going to be in breakout rooms. So
Okay.
just get rid of that in the recording if you just pause it instead of stop it. And then you would just restart it when everyone comes back to
Oh, I see. Pause recording.
Ah, okay, good. You're welcome. Let me mute.
Can you hear me? Everybody?
Yes,
Okay, good. Because I don't know why it keeps popping to something else. Let me know if I pop away again. I don't know why that is. So I think we're all back. I hope that was a useful experience for everybody. And now we're going to find out. Because we are going to share what we came up with. And you folks were really hard at work. I was very impressed with what you came up with in a short amount of time. And now we have our project ideas. So, oops, not this. So what I'm going to do is I have to escape out of this in order to, okay. So I have to, in order to write, I have to do this. All right, so can everybody hear me?
yes.
Okay, good. So group 1 with Deb and the Vernon historians. So I want you to slowly tell me what you wrote, and I'm going to write it for all of us to see. So who's going to share it? Go ahead. Oh, can you not hear me?
Oh, Deb, I think you're muted.
Oh, yeah, unmute. Oh,
Sorry, I'm saying, would you like me to put it in chat?
no, because we're gonna work. No, go ahead and read it. It's
Okay,
fine.
all right. So this is, the introductory sentence, we're seeking to preserve the Pond Road Chapel, recognized on the National Historic Registry. Preserving the history of a place.
Okay, wait, slow.
Oh, sorry.
Preserved in the okay, the
The
Pond Road Chapel, then what?
Chapel, and it's recognized on the National Historic Registry.
Okay,
Okay, preserving, and then here's the kind of justification, preserving the history of a place through its significant historic resources.
oops. Through its significant historic resources.
Mhm.
Okay.
Gives a community its unique character.
Okay,
During times of transition,
yeah,
It is the historical identity of a town
Yeah,
that preserves its community.
okay, is that it?
No, I've got one other longer sentence, sorry.
Oh, no, can't do it, because you're out of, this is already too long. Sorry.
Okay,
So we're gonna have to stop here. You can read it to us, but I won't write it down. So go ahead and
Okay.
read it.
so the one I didn't read is Vernon is struggling to retain these resources during the change in its identity from host to the Yankee nuclear plant to a rural town, hosting agriculture and small business. See, we weren't sure how to focus it, and that was part of it. Do we go with how we're replanning?
Okay, I'll go ahead and put this one because it's a great sentence, but we're gonna need, I mean, it's far too long. I'm just telling you. Okay, let's hear it real quickly.
Vernon,
I'm sorry.
Vernon is struggling to retain.
Ah. Boy. No. Okay,
All right.
yeah, go ahead.
These resources during the change
Yeah,
in its identity from host to the
Yes.
Yankee nuclear plant,
from post what?
to the Yankee nuclear plant. It might be host of the Yankee
Oh,
nuclear
from
plant.
host.
Host, H-O-S-T, yeah. The
Okay,
Yankee nuclear plant to a rural town. And I repeated the word hosting, but I don't like it anymore. Agriculture and small business. So what we're trying to say is we want Vernon to go back to be a family, small business, agricultural community. We're no longer a big glow in the dark community.
okay. I want to tell you that there's some really good stuff in here, but if I was your funder, I would already be saying they didn't follow the rules. This is too much. And I'm
Yeah.
only, and I would honestly, I would direct the reviewers. I would say, you can only read the first two sentences. I would actually take out the last two, because that's just the way it is. I mean, you're going to be limited on words and characters, and this is a good start. And this is the way I would start. And, you only had 25 minutes really, or 20 minutes, but so this is a good way to start. But now you're going to need to really narrow it down.
Right.
So what we're going to do is we're going to spend just a few minutes, because we only have a few minutes. And I want folks to say, I want to hear three of you say what is strong and what's good about this. What do you like about this? Three of you just pipe up who aren't on this committee. You're reviewers. What's good about this? What makes you want to read further?
Are you going to show us the screen or what?
Or can you
Oh,
read
you
it
can't
one
see
more
it?
time?
I'm sorry, I thought I was screen sharing. That's really funny. Okay, let me screen share. That would be nice. Where did my screen share option go? Isn't that funny? I can't even find it now. Share. No, that's not what I mean. Oh, I'm sorry, everybody.
Bring your cursor down to the bottom and it should
Yeah,
pop.
well, what's strange is that I'm not even in this, it's not even showing the Zoom anymore. Isn't that funny? I'm not even seeing the Zoom, even though I'm seeing you folks. Okay, let me see. Here I am. All right, I'm gonna bring there I am. Okay, sorry, gang. I thought I was sharing the screen the whole time. All right, share screen. Let's see if it works. Are you seeing it?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, and it's smaller because I have to make it smaller to bite on it. Sorry, everybody, I thought I was sharing. Okay, so very quickly, what do we like about this? What are some strong points? Just pipe up, somebody.
Preserving.
Again.
What?
I was going to say preserving the community so it has a wider audience.
Yeah, good. So it's really looking at not just the building, but that it's part of the greater community. That's good. Something else that's good.
The unique character.
Yeah, that's a good thing to say. Yeah.
I like the last paragraph.
Yeah, that's why I added it in. I thought that was one of the stronger ones too. And what do you like about it?
It's to the point. I mean, it talks about the history of a town that's lost and trying to regain that back from what ails it. I think that's
Yeah,
what
it
it's all-
really paints a picture of what is special about Vernon and why this matters to Vernon as opposed.
And everyone knows the Yankee nuclear power plant. Everyone knows what that is, whether you
Yeah.
live there or not.
No, it's very good. Yeah, that's a good thing. Okay, quickly, other than it being too long. Oh, I just wanted to say something that I like. I like that you say it's important to say what it is, but I would say we are seeking to preserve the Pond Road Chapel in Vernon. Because the first thing that you want people to know is that you just want them to know what this is. So I would just add in Vernon, but that's good that you just start out very clearly. This is what we're hoping to do. What could be stronger or better about this in addition to shortening it? And maybe people have an idea of how you might shorten this. Or is there something that, we could just take out?
It goes in, and one thing, this is Deb, it goes in two directions in my mind, and this is where we were having trouble narrowing down. We're talking about because I think the idea of the time of transition, I think that's one of the strongest things.
Okay, I want your reviewers to comment though.
Sorry. Okay.
So I want the outside reviewers to say, what could we lose here?
It seems like the first paragraph is a little redundant.
I agree. And that's how I often write too. I write it and then I say, oh, you know what? I don't need this. I don't need that. In fact, to me, this last sentence, Vernon is struggling to retain, these resources. I don't know exactly what these resources are because we're just talking about one, but during the change in its identity from host to the Yankee nuclear plant to a rural town with agricultural and small business, I think that could be somehow combined with historical identity and you could lose a lot of the sentence number 2 and 3. Do folks agree with that?
Yeah, I think if I can add, I think it's almost like it should be as Vernon struggles to regain its identity as it changes from the host of Vermont Yankee, we are seeking to preserve the Pond Road Chapel, recognized on the National Historical Registry as a prime example of what this community was.
Right. I didn't catch that whole thing, but yeah. Okay. Say.
You know what I'm saying? I know it's
yeah.
Kind of bring the first sentence, the last paragraph, up into the first paragraph as the reason why you want to preserve the Post Road Chapel.
Yeah, I think you said something about identity as a rural town.
Yeah, that's the end part. As a rural town, as a transition
to preserve. And you know what? I think recognize on the National Historic Registry is too long for this. You're going to say that in the narrative. I would say the historic Pond Road Chapel.
Right.
Okay. All right. So this is the idea, because I want to give a little time to everybody. We have to move on, but you can see this is an excellent start. And now what you do is you take this and you take what's the best, what's the most important of this, and you kind of narrow it down. So one of you, hint, hint, Deb, might even want to work on this over the week and, come back with a more terse, concise version. But this is a really nice start. So let's move on to the next one. All right. Number 2. Oh, that's not what I meant to have. It's not supposed to say draft goals. It's supposed to say summary. All right. So number 2, let's hear from you.
Yeah, ours was recovery housing. So I just dropped it in the chat so that it might help you copied over easily, but we came up with the roughly 300 men estimated to be in recovery, and Bennington County currently have no options for recovery housing within 40 miles, drastically affecting their likelihood of recidivism. We are seeking funding for transitional housing to serve approximately 12 adult individuals identifying as male in the recovery process annually, providing needed support services for residents.
I'm gonna look at the chat. All right. Good idea. I can copy and paste. Brilliant idea.
Correct.
Oh, if I can figure it out.
Providing needed support services for residents to successfully transition back to being healthy, productive members of the community.
Okay, let me copy and paste this. And then paste it. Okay, that was easier. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So everybody read this. And let's have a couple people say what we like about this in just a minute. You folks went a long way since I visited your group. This is yeah, this is good. Okay, what do we like about this, people?
It states right off the bat what they're asking for, what's
Right.
lacking.
Yeah, and you know what, I'm going to tell you, because we're running out of time and I want to give everybody time, we're going to start the next one with the next two, okay? So we'll do that because I want to give everybody a little time here. Yes, it states right off the bat it states a problem that everybody can relate to. What else do we like about it?
It gives facts.
I'm sorry, gives what?
Facts and hard numbers.
Yeah. Yes, it does. Yeah, well, they know what they're talking about, right? Yeah. And one other thing that's good.
I think that it really addresses the why it matters at the end.
Yeah, we talked about that a little, and that's, I think this group did a great job because if I can just tell, you started out by saying successfully transition to permanent housing. And then you quickly, then you started talking about the community and you quickly realized that it's much broader than that. And to me, this says so much more than that. It is a much stronger statement. And you did a great job on that. Okay. We like it. There's a lot of strong things about it. What is there something that could be better? Is there a way to strengthen this or shorten it or make it tighter?
The second sentence is really long. Is
Yeah,
there?
I usually do that too. And because, you want to fit so much in there and then I have to go back. Is there a way that we can somehow tighten that up at all?
Well, I think, it's all important. Can it just, is there a break point to make it 2 sentences or would that make it 2?
You know what? No, because I said you can't, because you can only do 2 sentences and that would make it 3.
I'm just gonna say out
I
loud.
can tell you
we thought
one
about
thing.
that too. We
What?
thought about making it 3 sentences to shorten it up like that, and then we all went, nope.
No, you're right. I'm not allowed. So
that's why
we
it's
can
so
just
long.
do something that just makes it a tiny bit shorter. There's little things.
What
I would
about,
just say 4. And why don't you just say, you can say 12 and then later you can say approximately 12. It's okay. So you can, that shortens it a little.
Do you need to say identifying as male? I
think that I understand why you're doing that now, because I think that you want to, I think it's common now to want to say that we're,
as opposed to assuming, yeah.
well, because it means that, for example, trans men would be invited.
Yeah.
So I would probably include that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering is because you say 300 men at the beginning. I mean, is it if you just kind of say for 12 adults, or for 12 men. I mean, you're saying adult individuals identifying as male. I mean, do you need
Oh,
to
I
say
see what
adult?
you're saying.
You need to
Yeah.
say adult individuals?
You don't need to
or,
say
I mean,
adult because we already said men, right?
right.
And could the identifying
or
as male
how
be
about 12
further in
adults?
the, yeah. And could the identifying as male be further in further in the grant?
That's a good point. What do you think, writers? Could you put that further in and explain that it's identifying as
Yeah.
male? I think we
Yeah,
can
I mean,
say that. So
that
why
would-
don't
that
we
would be-
say 12 men?
I mean, I
Right.
totally understand why, and
I think you can
and
explain that later. I like that. I think that's a
support
really good
why.
idea. That's a very good idea. Now, I want to tell you, I hate to do this, but I want to add a word. Because I think it's important to say where this is going to be. I know it's Bennington County, but is it in Bennington?
Yeah, it is in Bennington.
I think it's important to say that. So I would say for, let's see, where would we say that? We only have 2 minutes
Traditional-
more.
Could you say transitional housing in Bennington for 12 men?
Yeah, let's do that.
Well, in the first sentence, we have roughly 300 men estimated to be in recovery in Bennington County.
I know, but I still think it's important to say that it's going to be in the town of Bennington. I just think it just allows us to start to see it. We know now that it's going to be a place where there's services, where there's more people. It's not out in a field far away somewhere, which might be okay too, but that's a whole different picture that paints. So is this now enough? This is a little shorter. Is it okay, do we think? Anything else? Is there any other way?
And just
How about-
because,
I have one. How about the roughly 300 men in recovery? Because that's another way of saying estimated. Could we do that? Look. That's a little tighter. What do you think, everybody? I think that's okay to say. Okay, we have time for one more comment and then we're going to say goodbye because
well, it was just just because my mother was AA, she's passed away now, so I'm not breaking her confidence. 12 men in recovery annually. I mean,
yeah. What do you think of that, writers? What do you all think of that?
Necessitates process.
Right,
I mean,
you're right. I agree. See, this is what the wordsmith, I mean, and this goes back to yours too, Deb, number one. This is how you folks started is exactly how I start. You have more words than you need, and then you look at it and you say, how can we tighten this up? And I think that number one, that first one also has a lot of the right words. They can just be a little shortened and tightened. So with that, what do you think about this? Would you look at this and want to read on? What do you think, folks?
Yes.
Somebody who hasn't spoken up, does this sound good?
Yes.
Anybody? I think it's an excellent start. To me, this is a very good summary that tells what you're doing. It tells why you're doing. And as someone said, one of the most positive parts is that it really tells you why you're doing it in really a nice, short, concise words. So on that note, I will save these and we'll, have them and I'll share them with everybody because this is what we're going to start with. And I'm sure one of you has saved them too. And we'll start the next one next Tuesday by hearing from the other two. So you can even cheat a little and fool around with yours and make it a little tighter if you want. So this is a great start and we are going to dive into goals and find and come up with a goal, which is really hard work and good stuff. but this gives a really good start to it. So thank you, everybody. I will see you next week. Same time.
Can
same
I ask
place.
can I just
Goodbye.
just ask a quick question, just,
Yeah, actually, it's 5, so people can leave, and I'll stay around for 5 minutes if anyone wants to ask questions. But
I
the
mean,
rest of you, you're excused.
it's mostly process, and it's, the presentations are they gonna be emailed, made available on some website, just so we can review them, or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I sent you, do you mean my slides?
Yes,
I sent those out yesterday, so if you didn't get it, did most of you get those?
I'll double check and I'll send you an email if I didn't get them.
Okay, Nick, yeah, send me an email. You actually were on the list.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe it went into spam.
I get so many emails, I may have missed it, I'm sorry.
Understand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send each, so I don't overwhelm you, I'm going to send each week's slides. And then at the end, I will send you the complete set.
Okay,
all together.
And just this may be a later seminar, is most of what probably I'm looking at is all this governmental money that's gonna come flowing does this apply to governmental
Yes.
grants, the same sort of mindset?
Absolutely. The thinking that I use, the logic that I use applies to anything that is more complicated than we want to buy a stove for our kitchen.
Okay.
Anything that is multi-faceted, I think almost all of this really applies, whether it's 100,000, or 10,000.
Yeah, we have to buy a backhoe.
Yeah, that's a similar one, although you may, explaining this will actually take,
Great.
It really does, you want to give a good reason and a good understanding and the logic, like why does the backhoe matter? And
Yep.
I think the folks who were working on the parking area did some really good work in that, because you really have to figure out, well, we're doing a parking area, but who cares? So we'll see next week how that kind of evolved, which I thought was great.
I'm
So
actually
anything
curious
else?
for that one.
Anybody else?
Thank you very much, Ann.
Yeah, my pleasure. Any last questions? Good work, everybody.
Thank you, Ann.
Gone. All right, I'm gonna save this and, okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah. I just want to save it before.